Thank you all for joining me. Earlier this year, in a span of just 4 months, 3 New York City police officers were brutally gunned down. These tragedies shocked us, but we were hardly surprised to learn that the guns used in these murders were all illegal. Month after month, year after year, illegal guns tear apart communities in New York and across the country. According to the most recent federal data, there were 8,539 firearms recovered and traced in New York State in 2013, which is the most recent year for which we have data. And of those more than 8,500 guns, nearly 70% of them came from out of state. Yet there's not a single federal law defining gun trafficking as a crime. Weapons are illegally smuggled up the so-called iron pipeline and are trafficked into New York by people intent on selling them to gang members and other dangerous people who aren't eligible to buy guns from licensed dealers and so resort to illegal sales. Just a few weeks ago, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and New York Police Chief Bill Bratton busted a gun smuggling ring. They took 93 illegal guns off the street in just 6 months. But there is no federal law to stop someone from loading his truck with guns in Georgia, driving up I-95, and selling them in parking lots in our communities across the state. In Albany, the feds recovered 121 guns in 2013. In Syracuse, 317 guns were recovered. In Buffalo, 579 guns were recovered. And in Rochester, 624 guns were recovered. Gun trafficking is hurting our state. We have to crack down, and we have to do our job to stop it. The conventional wisdom says nothing can get done on gun safety in this current Republican-controlled Congress. Well, we aren't willing to throw our hands in the air and say something just to say something can't be done. Not while trafficked guns continue to take away our friends and colleagues and loved ones. Not while criminals can so easily get their hands on trafficked guns. Each and every one of us has a moral obligation to speak up and be heard. I'm introducing a bill in the Senate, a bipartisan bill, with Republican Senator Kirk from Illinois joining me as lead co-sponsor. It's called the Hadiyah, Pendleton, and Nyasha Pryor-Yard Gun Trafficking and Crime Prevention Act of 2015. This bill is named after 2 teenage girls who were shot and killed by trafficked guns. Nyasha was from Brooklyn, and Hadiyah was from Chicago. They were high school students who loved hanging out with their friends. Hadiyah was shot and killed by a trafficked gun when she was just 15, and Nyasha was shot and killed by a trafficked gun when she was 17. This bill is for them, and for the thousands of other Americans who are killed by guns every year. The Hadiyah Pendleton and Nyasha Pryor-Yard Gun Trafficking and Crime Prevention Act is a bill that would do what Congress and the Senate have failed to do for too long. It would make gun trafficking a federal crime. It would give our law enforcement tools to get illegal guns off the streets and to prosecute those who traffic guns. It would give our police officers tools to keep illegal guns away from criminals and gangs. I can't say this strongly enough. We have to pass the bipartisan Gun Trafficking and Crime Prevention Act. And for it to be effective, we also need to pass a strong bill ensuring that every gun purchaser goes through a background check. We have to do it now. We have to finally make gun trafficking a federal crime because enough is enough. Thank you, and I can take your questions.
Senator Alex Dunbar from CNY Central in Syracuse. Could you go into detail a little bit more of how does this elaborate on the existing laws regarding bringing guns from one state to another, which is already illegal?
Well, right now there's no federal law that says you can't traffic a gun from one state to the other. And in fact, really for law enforcement, most of the violations they could write you up on are paper violations that aren't serious. So this puts serious penalties for kingpins, people who are running these trafficking rings, 25 years for them, 20 years for someone engaging in gun trafficking. And that kind of law enforcement tool will make a huge difference because we are catching these criminals and we have to be able to put them in jail for the crimes they're committing.
Good afternoon. This is Dan Levy from News Channel 13 in Albany. What do you say to the people who believe that no matter how many laws are passed, that criminals will find a way to beat the system? Criminals, in other words, will be criminals.
Agreed, but you need to at least have a law saying what they're doing is illegal on the federal level. It's really important to be able to stop the iron pipeline. It is trafficking hundreds and thousands of guns every year straight into the hands of gangs and criminals. And it's very easy to buy a weapon today. It's not hard for a gang member to buy a weapon. And I have a statistic here. The typical age of someone who commits a weapons violation is 19, followed by 20, followed by 18, yet the legal age to purchase a handgun is 21. So that means most of these illegal guns are being purchased by people who are ineligible to purchase them. And we know that there are roughly 500,000 gun crimes every year in the United States, and 9 out of 10 gun crimes were traced to a gun that was acquired illegally and is bought by the person who did not use it for the crime. So we're talking about straw purchasers. We're talking about the easy access that a criminal has who can't get a weapon if he goes into a regular licensed gun dealer. He can have someone else buy it for him. He can have someone else buy several for him. He could buy it out of the back of a truck. And that's a real problem that we have to deal with.
And if I could follow up, the law seems to be targeting current gun trafficking operations. Is there anything in place that addresses guns that are already on the streets?
If they're being, this is just a trafficking bill, so it would only be able to get those guns off the streets if they're being resold. And if they're being resold and they're trafficked, then they can be arrested. So I think it just gives law enforcement more tools that they currently don't have.
And how would you gauge the success of this law, and how long might it take to gauge that success?
I think you'll know really quickly. If you pass this law, you will see how many gun traffickers you actually can convict. And it will be significant because, when I was first appointed to the Senate, one of the first things I did was sit down with Commissioner Kelly and his team. And they said they had no tools to actually go and prosecute these gun traffickers. And they didn't have even the authority, if there was someone bringing weapons up from Georgia, to actually trace that gun and to actually follow the trafficking ring to where it exists. Like, he didn't have the authority to do that kind of investigation. With this law, he would now have that authority.
Senator Mike Dozeman, the WBFO, do you have a House sponsor?
Yes, we do have House sponsors, and it's bipartisan. So I can get you all the co-sponsors so far. Let me see if I have the list. Do you have the list? Yeah, I'll send it to you. I don't have the list right now, but it's bipartisan.
So the fact you have sponsors in both houses suggests you at least might get a committee discussion or something.
Exactly. And if you remember, a bill similar to this bill in the last Congress, it got 58 votes. And there were several votes out there that I think if we had worked a little longer and harder on the language, we could have earned their votes as well. This is a revised bill. I think we can go out and try to get the 60 votes we would need to overcome a filibuster on this issue. And, there's gun death in every state, and gangs have far too easy access to weapons. Criminals have far too easy access. We need to be able to have more tools to put those individuals in jail.
Hey, this is Jan from WCBS. I don't know if you're doing off-topic questions at the moment, but I'm just
Well, let's finish on topic, and then we'll go to off topic.
Okay.
I'm Chris Bolt from WAER Public Radio in Syracuse.
Hi.
Could you describe why is it that the guns are traveling across state lines into New York? What's sort of the basis for that kind of market, if you will?
Well, New York has stricter gun laws. It has more background check requirements. It actually has more protections in place so criminals can't buy weapons. There are states, though, that have much laxer gun laws. And so what typically happens is you'll have a very small percentage, maybe 1% of gun dealers are actively trying to sell weapons to criminals. And so they will put guns in the back of a truck, and those guns will be brought up to New York State that has tougher gun laws and easily sold. So it's the difference. It's the difference in state laws that we have stricter gun laws and more safety precautions than other states. So it's better for a criminal to get a gun from another state that they can be purchased illegally, and that's what they do.
Senator Reed Shepard, WGY in Albany. You specifically mentioned Georgia as part of this pipeline. Could you give us a little detail about what this pipeline is up from Georgia?
Well, 1 in 3 guns has crossed state lines. Crime guns in New York, New Jersey, and Maryland often come from Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And I think, what were the states that the police officer deaths were from? Did we trace those to Georgia? Yeah, so I started my remarks with the fact that in a very short period of time, 3 police officers were gunned down by criminals who accessed guns from out of state. And I think at least 2 of those guns were from Georgia. Yeah.
Let's do
Senator
one
Mike
more
Osmond
on topic.
at WBFO again. Does this mean you can block the bill that would require New York to allow out-of-state people to carry guns?
Sorry, say that again?
There's a bill to essentially waive New York gun laws for out-of-staters who have the right to carry a gun in their home state. Can you stop that?
Yes, you can. There's an effort on the federal level to be able to do that, and I would not support that. Because we have very different dynamics in a state like Montana, which is a rural state that doesn't have the big cities we have, that doesn't have the gun crime that we have, that doesn't have the gang violence that we have. And so they can have lax gun laws in Montana because they don't have the same risks. They don't have the same criminal components that we have in different parts of our state. So we need to be able to crack down on criminals. They don't have that dynamic, so they have very lax gun laws. They also have so few people. I think they have less than 1 million people in that state, and we have 20 million in our state. So that's why states' laws are different, and we have to be able to protect our cities, particularly communities that unfortunately are plagued by gangs and serious criminal elements that too easily access guns.
Hi, Senator. This is Larry Epstein from WRNN-TV in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Without all states cooperating in shared databases for background checks, how could we really address keeping the guns out of the hands of the bad guys?
Background checks are essential, and I do support a very strong background check bill, and I think Congress should work towards actually passing a background check bill. We didn't, I think we only had, I think it was maybe 53 votes, maybe 54 votes in the Senate the last time we voted on a background check bill. But it was more than half the Senate, so I'm optimistic that we can build a coalition around a strong background check bill as well.
Let's go to off-topic questions because we're running out of time. Let's go to CBS in New York first.
I just want to see if I get your reaction to Iran's nuclear deal earlier today.
Well, I, of course, have always supported strong sanctions against Iran. It is a regime that we cannot trust. And we see continued terrorist activities coming from Iran. But if we could obtain a verifiable, strong agreement that would allow weapons inspectors on the ground at all facilities, at military facilities, that is something very much worth looking at. It would definitely benefit the United States' national security and Israel's national security if we had the ability to be on the ground and doing full inspections. I'm currently reviewing the deal to see if it meets the needs as I've outlined. It has to be verifiable. It has to be able to detect activities that are clandestine. And I'm looking specifically, and I'm waiting for the details on how we get to inspect mining and mills and other production, weapons production, so that we can actually detect if and when there is a violation of the agreement. So the verifiableness of it is the most important component, and the spot inspections, so that we can actually, if we get intelligence that there's activity going on, that we can actually go inspect that location. So that's what I'm looking for. There are a number of annexes that aren't yet available, which I will read. I intend to read the entire agreement and study it. But if we can have a strong, verifiable agreement, it will be to the benefit of the United States' security.
Let's go to Brian Tumulty at USA Today. Brian, you still with us? Okay, any other off-topic questions?
Hi, Dave Lucas at WAMC. Just a word about your position on Bill Cosby's Medal of Honor.
Well, it's the highest civilian honor in the United States, and I do not believe that someone who is admitted to giving women drugs in order to have sex with them should be given that honor.
Chris Bolt from WAER in Syracuse again. Back to Iran for a second. How much will people's desire to maintain the strong primary alliance with Israel influence, how Congress votes on this, even after they look over the deal?
I think many members of Congress, and I am certainly one of them, believe Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. It is the only democracy in the Middle East. And we have a kinship and a friendship and an unbreakable bond that we very much want to continue and to protect. So for most of us who care about the state of Israel and want it to be protected, we're going to look very hard at this agreement to make sure it's adequate, to make sure it's a good deal. And if we believe it is, many of us will support it. If individuals believe it doesn't, then they won't support it. But I think our view about Israel is very, very basic, that as our number one ally and friend in the Middle East, we want to make sure that Israel can be safe. Because at the end of the day, our security is very much intertwined. And as Senator from New York, where we are the number one terror target in the world, we want to make sure we are not allowing a country like Iran to militarize nuclear capability and be able to sell that capability to terrorists or enemies of the United States.
We have time for one more question.
It's Reed Shepard again from WGY. Mr. Netanyahu has said his country is not bound by the agreement. How much do you think that what he has had to say today will impact what Congress does in the weeks ahead?
I think Congress is very independent, and I believe members will review the agreement independently and make their own judgment.
That's all the time we have for today.
Thank you. Thanks for being on.